Okay, welcome to the Monday, September 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Policy Subcommittee of the Brookline School Committee. Our docket today will cover three items. One will be a discussion of our work process for the 2024-25 school year. The second will be a discussion and in coordination of the PSB mobile device policy. And the third will be a discussion of Section J, specifically sections of Section J 1 and 2, 4 and 5, and 9 through 11. I think that's what it said in the docket. If I got it slightly wrong, then I'll correct myself when that docket item comes up. For the first item of the work process, I want to frame that as twofold. One is to talk about MASC, and one is to talk about how we could work on reviewing the actual policies. So I spoke with MASC President Glenn Kuchar last week and the week before that about identifying a consultant who can work with us for the next 3 years on helping us review our policy manual with an eye towards ensuring that we're fully compliant with Massachusetts statute and regulation. He recommended to us consultant named Alicia Mallon, who I spoke with and who subsequently sent us a proposal for us to consider, which I forwarded to you, Andy, and to Vice Chair Suzanne Federspiel. I specifically requested that they offer us a process by which we can go through the entire policy manual over as our consultant over the summer said, a 3-year period, which is their core fee-based service, with two main objectives. One, to ensure our compliance with state law, and two, to advise us where we might be brought into alignment with what the MASC considers to be good policy practice. So that is the proposal that Alicia has sent to us for our consideration. I wanted to start by asking Andy and Suzanne, who is not here, so just you, Andy, what how the school committee, to my knowledge, we haven't considered something like that. I don't know how we consider fee-based services from ASC. So what process we might use to consider such a proposal? Uh-oh, did we lose you, Andy? Oh,
You're on mute.
yeah, I think he's dealing with something.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Had to deal with and then somebody asking a question about something completely different. Sorry about that, Stephen. You were asking what's the
Okay.
process by
If
which
there's a process by which we might consider an MASC consultant's proposal
Mhm.
for a service for these services.
Yeah, so I haven't had a chance to look at the proposal yet. I've been at work all day, but it probably depends on how costly it is, right? If it's well within our budget for our leftover funds for that's budgeted for like school committee expenses, then it probably shouldn't be an issue. But if it's going to exceed that or even sort of get close to topping it up, then we might want to discuss it maybe at the workshop, I would think.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the workshop next summer, you mean?
No, we have one coming up in October.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
It's my hope. I think it would cost something like $3,000 a year
Hmm.
for each year for 3 years. So it's my hope that we can outsource a lot of that work to MASC to advise us so that we don't spend all of our time figuring out how to update our policy manual on those issues, and we could spend our time delving into more value-based issues. So specifically working on policies where principals have asked us to focus our attention or where the community has asked us to focus our attention.
Hmm.
So we could spend the bulk of our time there. The MASC can make recommendations, essentially redlining our policy manual, saying here is where you can refer to a more updated policy, or here is a specific MASC policy that we practice or a good practice that you may want to consider in lieu of this policy or to supplement your policy or something like that.
Yeah, sounds like potentially something super useful. How about Suzanne and I can like take a look at the school committee finances with Betsy and
Sure.
figure out how, whether we can do this without having to cut back on other things.
Okay. I just wanted to get the rest of the subcommittee's thoughts on whether this seemed like a good move for the policy subcommittee?
Yeah, I would say it's an excellent move. I would strongly support it. And because we'll be paying someone who will be working on it and not relying on a volunteer and people who know the process and the content already, it's a huge win for us. We learned, I think, 2 meetings ago, Andy, that the policy manual for PSB is woefully out of date. And so this will help jump us, decades forward to catch up and pretend. And I believe the MESE rep who met with us like in May or something said that this might also include, I think they're housing our policy manual online in their system, which would make it like searchable and really up to date, a digital archive. It'll be listed along all the other, I don't know, 80 or 90 other cities and districts that have already gone that route. I think it's just a wise move for us.
Thanks, Jesse. Carolyn, your thoughts on this?
Agree.
Okay. Okay, so then I'll leave it to you, Andy, and to Suzanne to consider whether this fits within our budget.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
so part two about work process is so in the past, I think the work process of generating or revising a policy has started with, if it's generating, I think usually David would draft would have a first draft for us to consider, or someone would submit a first draft or a revision for us to start with. Just knowing David's work habits versus my work habits, I don't think I'm going to be nearly as productive as David at generating first drafts. So I wanted to propose, and here I'm really open to feedback. I would love to hear what you all think. We have a pretty packed proposed master docket for the year. So I wanted to propose work groups on specific policies. I've proposed breaking up the calendar so we have multiple sessions on every policy and ideally spread out over time so every policy has some time to gestate. I think I'd like to start by considering that every policy be assigned a lead member or members to work on an initial draft or revision, and that group be responsible for generating a first draft to bring to the committee by the time when it's docketed. So for instance, just bringing up the at the 10/21 meeting, we're going to consider the attendance policy, which is section J3 number 1. This was at the request of school principals, if you'll remember from August. And we have some notes from Betsy about what were some of the items they wish to consider. I think one thing we could do is we could assign that first review to a member or members of this committee for that first pass to prepare prior to that meeting. What do you think of that suggestion for a working process?
Are you asking us, Stephen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm totally behind that. In fact, as you know, for the cell phone one, I went ahead and did sort of that, but I didn't I just told you I was doing it and then wrote one and then put it into the PSB.
Oh, you wrote one? I didn't even see that you wrote one, Jesse. I'm sorry.
Yeah, actually, I think
I see it now.
it should be somewhere PSB mobile device policy. One of them. There's something in there that
No,
has.
I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah, so I was sort of that idea that that would, but that had we read, we'll get the process cleaned up a little better. I like your idea of the work group thing. Then and at the time I didn't know that all the schools have come up with their own. So
Yeah, so I had sort of assigned this one to myself in my head.
okay, great.
Since I hadn't had the chance to talk this through with you, but this would be a bit of a departure from how the policy subcommittee had operated in the past. So I thought I would take this chance to talk it through with the three of you.
Yeah, sure. So I like that idea. That way there's some thing going on between meetings, which is important. So when we come to the meeting, we've got a draft that's already been reviewed by 2 or 3 of us and others, and then we can discuss and proceed at these meetings.
Okay. Andy, Carolyn, Andy.
Seems to me, so we have a month between meetings, so it might make sense that at each meeting we can look ahead to the next meeting's docket, figure out which policies there would require, drafting anew, or whether, there's an existing MASC model, or it would be a compilation of existing, school policies, or if there's one from like some other district that we would take as a model, right? And then so there'd be a month to figure that out, but somebody would take the lead on kind of understanding and organizing, right? So we could sort of keep it, one meeting in advance, right? We can look ahead and
Yeah, so I
designate
agree
them.
with that. So for anyone who didn't listen, anyone who could possibly be listening and who also didn't listen to the previous school committee meeting, the way that I propose breaking up the policy subcommittee meetings this year is into 3 blocks. One, a 20-minute block, which is more of a discussion block that deals with matters that need to be discussed, and 2 work blocks of 40 minutes apiece. And for most of the year, I've proposed for the 20-minute block, focusing or at least including one of the upcoming work blocks, so that we have a chance to review the upcoming work and decide how we want to proceed with that upcoming work. So I've taken that suggestion into consideration by essentially previewing the upcoming work in the discussion block. So I want to take that suggestion. Carolyn, what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds fine. I like the idea of working ahead of time in between meetings and coming in, making the most of the time. I find it a little intimidating to imagine having to be responsible for bringing something in, but I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
I don't think you're any less qualified than the rest of us. Okay. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover in this discussion block. The only other thing is I just wanted to mention again, Betsy, I think I would like to publish that master docket of what we would like to take on this year. And I'd like to do it as a Google Doc so that it can remain dynamic. So it's not with the understanding that we still have to publish in advance a finalized docket on schedule.
That's
But
right.
that there is a more flexible, loose docket that we can maintain so that we can interest other stakeholder groups well in advance of the policy discussions, so that they can mobilize, bring their expertise, share their opinions with us.
And so I'll follow up as we, went back and forth in our emails. So my ideas were to work on an announcement with you that will go in Superintendent Guillory's newsletter, sort of as a start. Work with Neil to then embed that live Google sheet in a section of our website. Do a blast email to my distribution list. When I send out dockets for school committee meetings, I have sort of a broad group of all the schools and PTO leaders, and send it to that group. Every time we have a policy agenda, also including the link to the year-long docket. I think also maybe putting it on the school committee docket under the policy reports, another link there. And then from time to time, every once in a while, just working with Neil to include another update in Linus's weekly newsletter, kind of reminding people that it's there. So I think we'll be in good shape in terms of getting it out there.
That's great. Thank you, Betsy. I really
Mhm.
appreciate it. Yeah, and just one feature of that is I really tried to stagger the policies so that they generally aren't in consecutive meetings. So we have a little time between meetings for whoever's leading to take some time between that to take some time to work out the kinks. Yeah, Carolyn.
I like the idea of communication. Honestly, I think it would be a mistake to publish a year's worth of potential agenda items that are entirely likely to change, shift. I'm not comfortable with that. Like, I'm all for publishing, widely when we have public meetings. But that feels like
Like an overpromise.
an overpromise, putting the cart before the horse, and just like, I'm not sure what you mean about mobilize. And again, like I'm super into, I want more communication. I want to do lots of outreach. I would rather see us just kind of like get going, and maybe we could revisit that idea once we see how we're doing.
What
I
about just like
see
the
the
next two
necessity,
meetings
and I
then?
see more downsides than upsides.
I hear you. What about just publishing like the next 2 months worth, the next two meetings, just to give when I say mobilizing, I guess I really value community participation. Um, and so I would like to see community participation, especially
Well,
if it's
what
in an
would community
organized.
participation look like? So that's sort of a rate. And again, I love conversation, but is community, like, we are the school committee, we're elected, this is the subcommittee. Are you saying like every meeting is going to be involving people who aren't on the committee having? So, and that's not something that we discussed and agreed on. And that sounds unusual to me as a practice. I don't see that happening in any other subcommittee, and certainly not in the school committee. So, like, A, need to be convinced, and B, we haven't discussed that as a practice. So I would think we would need to agree on that as a practice.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to coming up through subcommittee, right, every proposed policy goes through 3 readings, I think, at the full school committee, which should give, I mean, that's widely noticed, right? And public comment can happen there as well.
I think
Okay.
it's 2 readings typically, but I'll check
Oh,
that.
okay.
But we do widely announce it when they do have their public readings.
I guess my thinking was that if there was an organized civil society group, I'd be interested in their comment on a policy if they had expertise in the area. If it's interested, Brookline community members, then I agree with you, Carolyn. I don't want it to turn into a free-for-all of everybody with strong opinions. But I think
To be
in a way
honest,
that's
any opinion, like, I'm all for public comment. Andy and I have been having conversations about public comment. I'd love, I like public comment, and I welcome public comment. And I often wonder why there aren't public comment periods on every subcommittee agenda, and I'm certainly open to that. But it sounds like you're talking more about inviting full participation. And I don't see how that fits. I like the idea of having public comment as part of subcommittee meetings.
what do you think, Jesse?
Been trying to get the policy that I was supposed to send you loaded up into the folder that you created, which I just did as you asked me.
Okay.
Thought about the conversation, so I added that PSB version in there. I have no issue sending it out in advance to people. The more information people have to be thinking about for those people who want to be engaged, the better. And I liked even the fact that you had a whole year's worth of meetings out there. I have, I think I have some opinion about what the order of how we address them are, but I think some of that was covered in the minutes, so we'll get to that. But I think having a year's worth out is very structured, and it allows people to schedule, and those people that want to be involved at certain times can come in and work with us. If you're talking, if I understood you correctly, are we talking about even having members outside the subcommittee work with us in the work groups? If they're interested, so disposed?
I hadn't considered that. I had only thought about school committee members and administration members who were interested.
Okay. So I think that, as transparent and as open as we can be with an open schedule to allow members from the public to work in those work groups with us so that we can work efficiently and get things done in an efficient way is great.
Okay.
I have no problem with that.
I strongly disagree with having work groups where we're working with people who are not elected to school committee. And I
So you don't
strongly
think
disagree
administration
with
is one?
having people who are not elected to school committee work with us, even in subcommittee, unless specifically invited. For example, this cell phone policy, and we have principals, that's super useful. And we had that conversation beforehand. I just think you're sort of, and I still disagree with, I think you're gonna publish a year's worth of meetings and it's gonna change. And then you're gonna have to deal with, why did it change? So why do it? Why publish something in October that you think you might talk about in March?
So I'm happy to back off this proposal. I didn't think it would be controversial, and I don't want to do something that's divided right away. And I didn't allocate more than 20 minutes for the discussion period. So I'm going to not do this. And if maybe we'll pick it up again next time if there's time. But I would like to not do this as a result. So I just want to move, if that's all right with everybody, unless everyone feels strongly that I should. So
Yeah,
otherwise, I'd like to move forward with the mobile device policy.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, Stephen, is that this principals did ask for, I think, 4 topics to be our top ones, and I think we should just make sure that we're smartly moving ahead and addressing those, so that it's not like a year to get those 4 done over the next, like, 9 or 10 months, where we should be able to knock them off and hopefully not get in the same situation, perhaps, that, we want to do attendance and we find out that 9 schools already have 9 policies on attendance, then we have to go trying to fit them all together because we're coming in behind, like cell phones. If we can get ahead of it, that would even be better. So, doing them sooner would be great. I agree with, I see Carolyn's point that putting them up, in a way, I'd say, like, why are some of the important ones that the principals had being pushed out to April or May? So yeah, let's not schedule it, and then let's just be successful by surprising them with getting them done quickly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to just say right off the bat that all of the proposed topics by the principals are areas that we will consider this year. Okay, can we move on to the mobile device the mobile device policies?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you also that there is some review of the minutes that should happen at some point during the meeting, Stephen. We didn't do it at the beginning.
Yeah, I thought we would just do that at the end. Okay. So first of all, thank you to the principals who contributed their schools' mobile device pilot policies. I actually hadn't realized that there were so many. We received 8. There were fortunately a lot of overlap because clearly principals worked together on it. Betsy, do you want to promote any principals who are here attending the meeting?
I think everyone is now a co-host.
Okay, great.
Donna, David. Yep, they should be able to turn their cameras on now. Hi, Jamie.
Okay, so I'll just start by saying I think I'd like to make it the objective of the school committee to pass to coordinate and eventually pass a single district mobile device policy. I think just reading through these a bunch of times, there was a lot of consensus. There are a few areas where there was a bunch of different ideas, but they were mostly in the weeds, it seemed to me. So in those areas, I thought we could have discussion, or we might even take time to see how these policies are implemented and what kind of feedback they get at the school level, or even what kind of data these policies result in. But at least at the preamble and values and general concept level, I thought there was a lot of consensus, and it shouldn't be, maybe I'm naive, too difficult to turn this into a district-wide policy. I don't know. What were your reactions, Carolyn, Jesse, Andy, anyone else?
Similar. I admit I didn't read them all. I read a few. It looked like there was tons of overlap. I'd love to hear from principals about how things are going. If there's things that they would do differently, and then I guess eventually some conversation about, like, how we can support them beyond, if we adopt this as a district-wide policy, kind of some structures around that to make sure that that serves the purpose that is helpful. I see this as us sort of taking the hit for the principals if that's what they need, and I'm certainly willing to do that as a school committee member. And then, yeah, I think we'd want to talk about communication, but later. And that's it.
I can talk about Runkle just because I think I brought the hammer down before any of the other schools. At the beginning of last school year, or was it the year before? Might have been 2 years ago. We started in the fall with, like expecting students to keep them off and away. And it became a huge battle between teachers and students in terms of trying to police the cell phones. And it was ruining the relationship between teachers and students right from the get-go. So I believe it was by the end of September, I unilaterally just sent an email to parents in middle school, 6 to 8, and said that we would be collecting cell phones at the beginning of every school day in homeroom, and just for the reasons I shared with you. I did not get anything but thank yous from my families. Nobody complained. We don't have any special device box to put them in at Runkle. Teachers either keep them in a Tupperware box or hang them in their closets in like shoe containers. And they collect them at homeroom, and we moved to collecting smartwatches as well this year because they were just as much of a distraction. And then the students come back at the end of the school day and pick them up. And sometimes they forget them and go home without them and have to get them the next morning. We've never lost a device, knock on wood. And we've always made exceptions if there's a family that's worried about their student. We've had students with some, significant mental health needs or that may need to have that phone on them for a security reason, just for their own well-being. And we always make exceptions if that's the case. And then this year we just moved to the 3rd to 5th grade doing the off and away like you see in everybody else's descriptions. I think we were all on the same page, the principals, with that policy because it's trickled down. So kids are younger having these devices.
Sorry, go on. Just making some notes. David, Jamie, anything you want to add to that?
Hey, Stephen. Yeah, actually, I just emailed your my policy to you.
Oh, thanks, David.
Plus our our steps that we take when students are caught with a phone out. Our middle school it's the same as Donna and Jamie. It's off and away during the day. Except our students keep them in their lockers. And we don't allow our students our middle schoolers to carry backpacks. And because we use an organizational system, which we then this year have moved back down to them carrying around a Chromebook and a binder. So there's really no place to put their phones if they were to have it somewhere. But we do have consequences that you'll see. We have different steps and stages for those consequences. Like the first step is basically a call home. We take it. There's like one steps, two steps, and 3 steps to the consequences, and each step is is a little bit of an escalation. So it's like a call to home, meeting with the parents, a detention.
Right. So a number of policies had that. They had there's level 1, 2, 3 offense here in Pierce. Lawrence had a similar thing. There were some of them were the same, and then some of them had slight differences. I think what was it? Was it FRR that had it? And now I'm forgetting. But yeah, so there were slight variations there, but that was another feature. Was the 3 strikes.
Right. And I think I mean, ideally, what I would like to move to, I think, and is similar to what Donna has implemented, and I think some other schools are going towards is taking them and just locking them up or having kids have them locked up in the morning. I think it allows for fewer possibilities that they would come out in any form or fashion if we know that they're away and we have them. Right now, again, we're just relying on our the kids putting them in their lockers. And our code of, so our middle school team meets on a weekly basis to go over the code of conduct. They log everything, every instance. So we're relying on the code of conduct to track whether students are not following the cell phone policy. So again, our team is really unified in this, and I second what Donna was saying. When cell phones came in, it was a real battle, and I think not only with staff but parents would appreciate having a consistent response to this.
Thanks, David. Andy?
Yeah, thanks. I've got a question for the principals. So if the main purpose of having the school committee write a policy is to sort of provide backup to building leaders on this, do we need to actually say anything about consequences and that sort of thing in the policy, or is that something you feel like the buildings could determine on each on their own feet, whereas the policy would just be more general about basically off and away for K-8, and then at the high school it'd probably be different because most high schools I think have it off during classes, but you can have them back during passing time. But if we stay on that level but don't spell out, oh, first offense this happens, second offense that happens, is that something that you feel could be left to the buildings, or would you prefer that the school committee address it?
Personally, I would prefer language that included, consequences up to including having to turn your phone in on arrival, right? Like for me, the vast majority of our parents and students understand why we're doing this and support this, right? Like the pendulum has swung far enough that I think people are seeing the harm that the technology is doing to their children, and they transparently don't know how to roll it back, right? It's like the horse is out of the barn and they're desperate for anything that helps get the horse back in the barn. And this is doing that. So that's awesome. And there are still going to be occasional families who really push back hard against this. And so if we think about this policy as really for those unusual occasions, to name that school committee is in favor of, if necessary, those phones needing to be turned in on arrival at school. My hope is I would never, ever need that. And like in my current community right now in this moment, I don't think we have anybody here who needs that. But can I promise you that somebody isn't going to come in from another district or another place in the world and have very different feelings and ethos about cell phone access? No. And the fewer fights we have to fight because there's a policy behind us, the more we can keep our focus on instructional leadership, which is where I think you want to be spending money on us.
Okay, so we can have some kind of up to and including language about consequences, but not necessarily have to spell out each intermediate step. Okay, that would keep it cleaner, I think. Great.
Yeah, that was my question as well. So when I was looking at other districts' policies, they rarely do spell out the specifics of the consequences. So both Newton and Linfield passed mobile device policies in the last month. And they have very different very different consequences. So Linfield has a lot of specificity about the consequence. Newton is very short and sweet, just 3 paragraphs apiece, one for K-8, one for 9 to 12. So then I went to MASC to learn a little bit more about the description of consequences. So typically the policy subcommittee has tried to stay away from describing consequences and protocols, as a matter of course, preferring to leave it to schools. But MASC is actually very ambivalent about that. It says that it's not outside of the policy subcommittee's purview to do that. So I think I really support, Andy, the way you phrased that question as, would it be useful to principals for the school committee to spell out consequences? So I'm curious to know if other principals feel the way that Jamie does, that some level of description of consequences would be helpful, but not diving too deeply into the weeds. That seems to me just the kind of information we could use here.
It's a very good question. I think my initial response to that is, as a policy, that school committee's writing, obviously we want to just let everybody know that cell phones should be off and away during the day. Now, if The only thing is if a school imposes a different consequence than another school, then you get the school shopping, then you get, anytime you see a divide, it becomes challenging. I think in this case, we could be very simple. I think we all have like 3 steps that we can almost meld into, the same 3 steps that we all follow. I don't think that's too challenging, but I think that's my only concern, that if you have something general, what I don't want to do is get into a battle and hear from somebody, well, so this school does it this way. Why don't you
Right.
do it that way? So that's the only thing.
Donna, you have any opinion on this one about how specific you'd find it helpful for the policy to be in terms of describing consequences?
No, I feel the same as Jamie. I think just a general, like I was just reading on one of those pages that just said,
Yeah, it was the Newton one.
a 3-tiered consequence or something. I think we're all on the same page with that.
Oh,
I don't think you have to be specific.
okay.
That each school would have a 3-tiered policy for consequences.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Any other basic concepts that you think need to be in the policies? Or anything else from the school committee members that struck you on these policies?
Only because somebody raised the issue of not losing one. Is there liability that we should talk about? Like, is that something that we could just, I don't know, run by?
I
Are
think
there liabilities?
did Jamie write in, I think in our handbooks, it says we're not responsible for lost items or something like that. I don't know if it covers all of us, but is that what you rely on, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of why we don't take them. That's part of why I raised my hand, is that my teachers do not feel comfortable taking on that responsibility. And so our policy is often a way, if we see it, we take it, and then it goes to the office and an administrator locks it up so that that's out of the teacher's hands. I think that's an important thing for this committee to consider, like what is the level of liability that the district is willing to explicitly state they don't have around this? Because I think that is a point of order, as it were, on this particular policy. I also think it will be helpful for parents to understand that this is actually a policy that supports school safety. I think a lot of parents have an illusion that in a school crisis, their child having their smartwatch or their phone helps. I don't run a high school, so I would defer to Anthony about his thoughts about the high school, but I can tell you from experience with non-emergency emergencies here, AKA like sprinkler malfunctions that trigger a fire alarm, which means the fire trucks come, that smartphones and watches were definitely a distraction and a detraction from school safety and made it harder for students to be present and listening to their adults. I think that framing is going to matter to some families, because the very real fear that our families have when they send our children to school every day is that children get shot in school every day. And so we need to acknowledge that this is a policy that's crafted with the intent of helping keep kids safe.
And I also think that the 2 schools that just, I know FRR and Lawrence purchased, one of their PTOs or through a donation got lock boxes for each homeroom so that the kids can slide them into a box that locks in the classrooms. We've never had that at Runkle. Teachers have not asked for that. We have a lock box in the office for the ones that we collect, but we haven't had a problem with it.
Should that be standardized across schools?
I don't know. That's what I'm wondering. 'Cause
I don't know
it's not
either.
equitable in that, I'm sure if I asked my PTO, they'd buy them, but it just isn't, I just have not felt the
Yeah.
need for that, but someone tells me I should, I will.
Well,
And-
and there's an equity issue in terms of the time it takes to have everybody lock those phones up. In a school with 400 kids, that's going to take a lot less time than in a school with 1,000 kids. And that time is lost instructional time, right?
Why would it take longer if it's
Because
done in
the-
the classroom?
Well, because there's more kids in classes and more teachers and more subs and more things that happen in any given day that require redirection. So as somebody who has operated in a 3-section, 4-section, and 5-section school in Brookline, I can tell you that you lose more instructional minutes in a 5-section school to all the things than you do in a 3-section school.
So we have a homeroom that runs for literally 6 minutes in the morning. There where they take attendance, they literally collect phones, and we only collect them 6 to 8. So
Right.
just to be clear, I only collect them in middle school. So the kids literally are, so they walk in, they put their phone in a box and they sit down. That's how, and they take attendance. It's just it's just part of their routine now. And then at the end of the day, someone said, well, how do they get them? They all come back to their homeroom teacher and get them at the end of the day because they want their phones. And so yes, we haven't put time into the schedule for them to get their phones. They come after school and the teachers have them out for them and they take them.
Yeah, but Donna, some schools have first period conservatory. That's me, right? So there is no time in the morning before conservatory for homeroom. Conservatory starts at 8. So
My
that-
conservatory starts at 8:05. So
that's an interesting fact. I did not know. Mine starts at 8 on both mornings a week with our middle school. But also at the end of the day, what happens if you have a middle school teacher with a last period prep?
they're in their classroom usually at their prep, right?
Right. So what if they're at the copy machine, or what if they're in an IEP meeting? Or
The phones are on the desk. They leave the phones on the desk and the
Right.
kids come and take them.
Can we do that if they're locked up though?
I don't know. Ours aren't locked, so I don't know. I'm
Right.
just saying, like, that's why we don't lock them. The kids have never. I've had one instance in 2.5 years where there was a missing phone last year, and it was because 2 girls thought it would be funny to put their friend's phone in the sink, and we found it within 40 minutes. That's it in 2.5 years.
That's my point is the devil's in the details with all this stuff though, and like whether or not the school committee wants us to lock them up or not lock them up, or feels like there should be equity across schools like that, though that level of weeds, we're gonna need everybody in the room to weigh
Right.
in. Because each of us has our very unique specific situation. And as Donna said, 6-8's different than 3-5's different than K2. And so just lots to consider in the details end of it.
Jesse, then Andy.
Circling back to the loss of the cell phone that Donna referred to. So the Philadelphia policy that I had uploaded in there, and I also sort of embedded in the PSB draft, was that the district shall not be liable for the loss, damage, or misuse of any cell phone unless it is lost or damaged while in the custody of the district. So that is if it has been confiscated. And so I would suggest that we want to have some sentence in our district-wide policy that says that, so it's clear. So there's no wishy-washy about what happens if a phone happens to become lost.
I would just say, as a matter of course, any policy that we're generating, we would run by our council before we look for a vote to approve it, so that we shouldn't spend our time worrying about liability in these particular meetings. Andy?
Yeah, but this is just, I had my hand raised when we were talking about the boxes. I mean, I teach in a school where every classroom has just been supplied with a box, and most of them go unused. They're just not needed, although some classrooms find them useful. So I just don't think we should be specifying, how things are put away as long as they are. So.
I agree. It seems to me just listening to this, that level of specificity isn't required of this policy. Just that because why? What's the value of requiring a specific what's the value of requiring that? How? Jamie's point is if there's an equity issue, but as long as each school has a way of storing the mobile devices, right? Then that's what's required.
I agree. Yep.
Okay. Okay, I'm just thinking if there's any other major elements of policies when I was looking them through that I wanted to bring out. The only other thing that I'm thinking of right now is that I think we definitely want to have a K-8 and a 9 through 12 section of this policy, because I think the BHS policy had a different discourse than the K-8, and I would want to get BHS's input on what they think is critical to this policy. And also when I was looking, and Newton did the same thing, a bunch of other districts had done the same thing. I just put a few in there, but it seemed to be standard practice to have something separate for K-8 and 9 through 12. Andy, do you disagree with that? Okay.
No, it's very standard, I think, for high schools to, not take the phone away all day. You just have them away during class, and you can have them back during passing time, lunch, and sometimes study hall, depending on the school.
Okay. Okay. Any further thoughts on this policy? Okay, I want to assign this one to myself and then propose having a draft of it coordinated from the text of the existing policies, because I think it's going to be kind of easy, and I want to start myself out with an easy one. Am I crazy to think this is easy? Does it seem harder to you all? All right. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'll have a draft for you all next time. I'd also like to circulate it to the principals for their feedback, but it's optional. I think you already have your policies, so if you'd like to contribute, great. If not, I don't think there's any requirement to. Any further comments on this part of the docket?
Sorry, I do have a quick question, and apologies if this is in some of the policies that were shared with us. In terms of exceptions, principals, do you note the possibility of exceptions in your policies, or do you just wait for that to come to you and deal with it on an ad hoc basis?
My policy identifies that there can be exceptions made for medical need.
Okay.
Are there any other categories of exception that you would call out?
I mean, medical meaning mental health as well.
It could include that, yeah. If there's documented medical need, absolutely, we will make an
Mhm.
exception.
Are there ever kids with IEPs that needed electronic device, a personal device?
Well, they have the Chromebook, so
Oh,
Right,
they already have the Chrome, okay.
exactly. Sometimes they have like access to music or something like
Yeah.
that. There are other devices that they can use for that.
Right, that aren't connected. Okay, yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I don't know if mine is spelt out in my policy, in my protocol, but we certainly could add it, but I've always just handled it on a case by case basis.
Would seem better not to invite it. to the
Yeah, it
extent
is. I think
possible.
medical is the only one that we've medical meaning. I think I believe if somebody has like a glucose monitor, I think we had
Uh-huh.
things like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, principals, for joining us for this. So we can now move on a little early to the last section of our agenda for today, which is a discussion of section J. So I'm proposing for this year that we review. Okay, so just to back up one step again, it was my understanding that that Jim Hardy proposed an entire review of the policy manual, that we turn the entire thing over. So I'm suggesting that we start with sections B and J because they're of high relevance to the school committee and and they contain a lot of issues that I think come up over and over again. And I think it's a good place for us to start if we're really going to dive into the policy manual. So I'm going to bring up section J to start with, and I'm going to share it with you. Section J contains a number of subsections, hang on, that we've already talked about. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Once I do this, I can't see your faces anymore, so just interrupt me if you want to say something. Has a number of subsections that we're going to talk about specifically, which is why I'm proposing only pieces of it for the review right now. So what I'd like to do in this section is just review the sections of the subsections of section J and what it means to review all of section J. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So first of all, section J contains the student code of conduct, which is something that we're proposing to review specifically later in the year. And it also contains the attendance policy, which we're also proposing to review later in the year. So I've taken that out of this review item. It also contains sections 6 and 7, policy against discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, and retaliation, and our bullying prevention policy, including our prohibition of hazing. I've taken that out as well because we reviewed these last year. And I think if we're going to review them again, I would like to get the input of the administration as well. I just want to get your feedback on that first. I'm saying that because I think for MASC review everything purposes, it's less needed to re-review 6 and 7. And we would only do that if there's a value-based purpose to re-reviewing sections 6 and 7. Does that make sense?
How does the review or non-review have to do with the draft policy on hate speech that was drafted by the committee before Carolyn and I joined?
So I think if we want to take that up again, we could take that up, but that I'm happy to docket that if that's what we decide should be docketed because we want to take up the topic of hate speech. But for the purpose of getting through the entire policy manual, I just want to get through stuff that hasn't been reviewed in like 30, 40 years.
Okay.
So that's what's drawing my attention to this. Does that make sense, Jesse?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to push out stuff just because I just want to look at what we haven't looked at for a long while. That's what I'm using to structure this session. Yeah, Andy.
So are you drawing a distinction, Stephen, between sort of values-based revisions of certain policies and ones that are more just housekeeping?
I guess that's a better way to put it. I'm saying since we reviewed those policies last year, I don't know why we should review them again if the purpose of this is just to bring everything up to date. So I guess, help me out because I'm inventing this as we're going. And I see this part of the docket as working with the MASC consultant to go through all of Section J to make sure that we're not referencing any regulations, statutes, and law that don't exist anymore or that have been superseded by something that's been passed since the policy was drafted. And also looking through it for references to something that may no longer exist in Brookline. For instance, there's parts of Section J that refer to school resource officers, which we currently no longer have. Maybe we'll restore them, maybe we won't, but currently we don't have them. So maybe there are other institutions or individuals or positions that are referenced in Section J that we need to take out. Maybe similarly, there are also ideas, concepts, something else that's value-based that we want to reconsider in Section J. It's with that in mind that I think we should review all of Section J. Since we already looked at a couple of subsections last year, I think we don't need to do that again right now. It's all the other sections that I think we should take a look at. That's the purpose, I think, of this review. And with the goal of saying at the end of this year, 2024, all of Section J reviewed, or you know how every section has a last checked April 23rd, 1979 or whatever. So with the idea that all of it will have said 2023 or 4 or 5 by the end of this calendar year. Does that seem like a reasonable goal?
It does, and I don't want to sort of get waylaid. I'm looking at section 6, students, which I think you said was one that sort of like was done last year and maybe is heftier, so harder to do. I don't see this noted as, it says
Did I get that wrong?
01/7/21, which I'm not advocating for jumping right back into it. I just didn't see that it was done last year. It also says a workplace and educational environment,
Oh,
even
then
though
I
it's
agree with you.
students.
I agree with you, Carolyn. Let's put that back in then, please.
But I don't know. I don't want to make it.
No, I put that in there because I thought both sections were 2024. And then if I got that wrong, wait a minute.
But don't say you agree with me, because I'm not necessarily advocating, I'm just noting that
Hold
as
on,
I'm
no,
looking
hold
at.
on.
But
Neither
I
section
agree with
says
the
that.
idea of, I guess what you're saying is, let's do the easy ones first.
Yeah, wait, hold on. Neither section says that. And now I'm confused. Betsy, do you happen to know? I know I saw something that said that we did something in these sections. Am I crazy?
I am going to start pulling up while you're talking here. Let me just pull up what I have in my files on section J.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, if I'm crazy, I'd like to put those sections back on the table.
Mhm.
Because the only reason that I had pulled them was because I thought that we had just reviewed them.
So maybe if I show you what I have in my file, if you want to stop sharing for just a
Yeah.
moment, and I will pull up. Which was dated April 2024. So let's go to, sorry, move one thing aside. So
What's wrong?
You're
Oh,
you're
sorry,
not on mute,
sorry.
Karen. It's okay.
sorry, I'm going through this so slowly.
It's okay.
Sorry. My husband went, oh, but he said it was only because he's old. There's nothing wrong.
So I definitely don't have anything updated on bullying prevention. But let me go back to section 6.
Yeah, it was 21.
Yeah. So I'll have to compare it in terms of what was the change that was made in April of 24. I'll look back at our school committee records to see
Okay.
what was updated then that caused me to update section J.
Okay. Thanks, Betsy. If
Mhm.
those weren't in fact updated, then I'd like to reconsider them as well, so that we have everything recently updated.
I think this policy underwent a very thorough review back in 21. I think it may have been prompted by updated regulations from above. And then the most recent revisions were just tweaking a few words again in response to new regulations from above.
Okay.
So I would not have this high on the list of things that we need to review again now.
Okay.
21 is pretty recent.
And there was a huge amount of staff input. In fact, it was staff driven. It was not really a values driven revision at that point. It was that we had new regulations that we had to comply with.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. I knew there was a reason why I was proposing to take that out. So let me share my screen. I'd just like to go through it section by section with you all, just so that we all see what's in there, what this includes. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so first, section J includes our admissions policy. This was last dated in 96. It includes Metco. That's J1. Then J2 is placement. That was last updated in 1986. So that should be excitingly creaky. Then we have section 3, which is attendance, which we're going to skip for now. Section 4 is a disclosure of discipline. Oh, no, that's too much.
That's just a subsection.
All right, that's the subsection. That's right. 4 is records, rights, responsibilities, and involvement. So that includes a lot. That's right. That's student records. That's confidentiality of records. That's disclosure of disciplinary records. That's cumulative records. And that's non-custodial parents' rights policy. So those were all updated last in 06. But those were updated at different times, actually. But they're all pretty old. So that's J4. Okay, 5 is searches and seizures. That's pretty short, but last checked in 91. No, 89 to 91. 6 and 7 is discrimination, harassment, and retaliation, and 7 is bullying prevention. Section 8, we're going to skip for now, is the student code of conduct. That's enormous.
Is the student code of conduct an overlay on the individual school codes of conduct? Like, you know, Hayes sent us theirs when we asked.
No,
them.
that is what they use for their code of conduct.
It should be the other way around. We believe that the schools should be aligned with the district.
Okay.
Right. I think that's what the principal said, though, is that they pull that in. So, which is why, though, that I want to docket that separately, because I think we heard that they would like to they'd like to see that refreshed, right? Next we have student fees, fines, and charges under 9. That was last looked at 8 years ago, but that was before our recent conversation about equity at all. Then we have student financial assistance, also from 2016. And then student yearbook policy. Carolyn, you were right. For some reason, I said this went up to 12. It only goes up to 11. So those are the sections of Section J. Going back to all of you so I can see you again. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
So the yearbook policy was also revised pretty recently. I don't know if you want to take that off the list of things to review. That one was values driven, actually, that revision.
Right, you're right.
Yeah.
So why don't we remove that one as well?
I had a sort of broader question about this level of review, the sort of housekeeping level. I mean, what MASC could provide is, of course, you know, comparison with other districts and sort of whether we're up to date with regulations and such. They won't have necessarily the local knowledge. You know, another way a policy goes out of date is it gets way out of line with the way we actually do things, right? And it just doesn't, this kind of becomes a dead letter. And so are we proposing to do another layer of review that kind of makes sure that things are actually aligned with our current practice?
Do you mean by
Can you give us
involving
an example
administration?
of that? Oh, sorry, Stephen.
Go ahead.
Can you give an example of what you're thinking about, Andy?
Not off the top of my head. It's just in such a big, you know, in such a big manual, right? For example, the mentions of SROs, right? Like that might be a case where an MASC reviewer wouldn't notice that, oh, this is out of line with our current practice, because they may not know that we don't have SROs anymore. You know, that's maybe an extreme example, but I bet there are hundreds of other cases where just somehow, you know, we refer to a position that no longer exists, things like that. And I'm not sure MASC review will catch that. I'm asking whether we need to do that or whether we're satisfied at this point with just having the MASC type of review.
Right. I think we need both. So I think what I imagine happening is that the MASC review will make suggested edits based on what's out of compliance and where it can be improved with reference to other neighboring policies or specific MASC policies that we might consider. And we will also review these policy subsections with our own contextual knowledge of Brookline and make suggestions of where it's not right anymore, or where we might suggest values-based revisions. And by bringing those two reviews together is how we would update a section.
Right.
So hiring MASC does not absolve us of the need to actually comb through the whole thing ourselves independently through a different lens.
Right, but it's my hope that not every section will require deep contextual review and values-based updating. Perhaps some will, and perhaps some won't, just like perhaps some will require legal updating and some won't. I guess I don't really know until we've done a section and seen what has been the heavier lift.
And even, Andy, if they gave us a policy about SROs and we don't currently have them, as long as it was a standard policy that we could agree with if we were to have them, and it may come back, having it in the policy manual, is that really a problem? It just makes statements about how to address, manage protocols, approaches for SROs, even if, say, you know, we don't have them now, but might in the future would still apply. It's not like against anything. It'll just be sort of, it would be like in cold storage, as it were. Wouldn't spend a lot of time on it, of course, but
So what Alicia said to me was that she would make a suggestion about where our policy might be better served by an MASC policy, or point us to a policy that's in their online database, or where a section of a subsection might be better replaced by a section of an MASC or another policy in their online database. So again, essentially a red line version of our existing policies. So, so I think we would essentially sit with our marked up version and their marked up version to see which edits we want to integrate and which we want to leave alone. And also incidentally, which, if any, policies or policy subsections we want to get rid of altogether. I think it's my sense that we have more policies than the average district.
Yeah.
Or longer policies than the average district. So I think that's the task for us here.
So this all sounds fine to me. I don't want to over talk on process. I do have two things I'll say. One is when I skimmed through the first section of sections that you said you wanted to cover, Stephen, I wondered, and this I suppose will be answered as we go, whether some of this is really even up for discussion. Like some of it just seemed like kind of legal stuff, or that we would not, that would feel like beyond my authority as a lowly school committee member. But I suppose we'll sort of address that as we go. And the other thing, maybe we don't need to super debate this. For me, there's a little bit of like a mathematical approach to like, aren't you supposed to do the harder things first? Maybe we could intersperse some of the more challenging middle stuff along the way, because it might be more urgent or more important, but not a hill to die on, just sort of a thought.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm not averse to doing something really hard next. I just wanted to start with something
Agree.
that we could all just get our hands into.
Go through and see how we do. Yeah, totally.
Oh, sorry, I think my connection just dipped out for a second. I might have missed what you just last said.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I'm not saying like, let's start with the hard stuff, but I'm also saying maybe not, let's not put it off until necessarily the end of the whole shebang.
I hear that.
But also let's just see how it feels as we start.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
fine.
I'm happy to do that.
And that's not like a strong, that's just a like, put it in your pipe and smoke it kind of thought.
Okay.
I don't smoke.
We'll add a section on that, the smoking habits of school committee members and what's allowed. Okay, so let's talk about how we want to do this for section J. I think we can all just, Betsy, do we have a document version of section J?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Do you think
We can all access it online, the whole thing
well, it's all
online.
PDF'd online.
That's
I feel
PDF,
like
yeah. But
editing
I
in
have a
PDF.
Word version.
I
I can put it into a Google sheet, a Google Doc, if,
Oh, yeah.
is that what you're thinking, or?
Well, I feel like putting it in and out of Google Docs can sometimes mess up formatting.
Definitely, but
I feel like maybe, well, is this the discussion we want to have in the policy subcommittee? I guess so. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Is the purpose of putting it in a Google Doc so that we can all work on it offline? Because I'm not sure we can do that outside the context of a meeting.
Oh.
Right. Collaborating on a document.
Right.
Actually,
You're right. So what if for this, thank you. What if we all received a copy of the Word document? We marked it up, and for this one, we all sent it to one of us who integrated all the comments into one Word doc, and that's what we reviewed in the next session of this. And the 40-minute work session is the process of integrating those marks.
I mean,
Is that acceptable, Andy?
I think so. That's the hub and spokes version where, as long
Okay.
as the various people on the spokes aren't communicating with each other, only with
Really,
the
okay.
hub, then-
And sorry, I have to say, this makes me wonder now if we can do this idea of working groups, because if it's two of us, is that a quorum? When you have a 4-member group, is 2 a quorum? Just putting it out there.
I don't think 2 is a quorum, right?
No.
So if for example Stephen were the lead, we could all communicate with him and give him our suggestions. He would collate them, and I believe that would be okay.
I'm talking about what we talked about in the beginning of, like, with all of the work, doing work in between,
Right.
as
So
like working groups.
Well, I think 3 of us shouldn't be meeting outside of the context of a subcommittee meeting, but
But
it's,
my question is whether it's okay for 2,
yeah, it's not a
given that
majority of
there's
the
4
board.
of us.
yeah, so 2 should be okay. So
Okay,
would someone like to volunteer to be the collator of comments?
For one policy or for the
For
future?
section J. So all of us will send our marked up version by a certain date to the collator, the section J collator.
I can do it.
Okay. Okay. Or should we just send it to you, Betsy? No, you have enough. You do, actually. So I'll send it to Carolyn. And then we'll review Carolyn's version with all of the comments in it, and we'll decide what to a new version of section J to present to the school committee for a possible vote.
Okay,
Okay, hopefully also before then, we can also propose Andy to school committee the contract with MASC, so we can commission a red line version of section J as well.
And I apologize because I didn't share it with everyone, but the subcommittee did move to school committee, and it did have 2 readings, but then it was sent back to the subcommittee last spring. One of the sections J, 2, assignment of students to schools, where there was talk of having a request to remain policy, allowing students. So I have a draft of that. Again, it went to the school committee twice, but then there were some questions and discussion, and it was sent back to subcommittee for continued discussion. So
Thank you, Betsy.
we do have.
So let's send that to Carolyn as well for replacement of the current section 2 for replacement in the relevant sections.
Yes, it's section J1F, assignment of students to schools.
Okay, and then we can discuss that in our next meeting of section J. So the 40-minute block for section J next time. Thanks for your patience with me, everyone.
This is fine. You're doing awesome, Stephen.
I'm figuring it out as I go. The next 40-minute
This is
block.
what policy subcommittee is supposed to do. So we're just not used to doing it. So we have to work out how.
Okay, the next 40-minute block will be the review of a new draft of the subsections of section J that we've agreed will be in there, which is everything but sections 6, 7, 11, and 3. 3, 6, 7, and 11. And
Will you send us an email that sort of says, do this by this date?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that will be inclusive of a draft of part of section 2 that had been previously considered by the policy subcommittee. And that we will all mark up with an eye to Brookline context and possible values-based changes, and send to Carolyn for the integration of all of our comments.
I don't think we need to say which things that you can have.
Let's try not to make, like, unless we really have to, like stylistic or grammatical changes. and just make those contextual or values-based comments, because the fewer changes, I think, the better. Like only the ones we really mean. And then we'll also try to see if we can move forward with contract to MASC for their version. And the goal for the next 40-minute block on J will be the integration of those comments for a new draft version of those subsections of section J to put before the school committee. Okay, I think that's clear to me. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
This feels really bureaucratic.
Well, we'll make progress.
Yeah, at least the mobile phone policy feels like substantive and
Yeah.
think about actual humans. Okay. Anything else on this part of the docket?
Excuse me.
Bless
Bless
you.
you.
And again,
Bless you again. Okay, let's just take a vote on the minutes from, I'm gonna pull this up. What was the date of those minutes again, Betsy?
August 19th. It was the meeting we had in person with the
With the
principals.
principal, that's right. Can I have a motion for those minutes?
I'll move them.
And Carolyn seconds. Andy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jesse?
yes, there was one grammatical change I wanted to suggest, but other than that,
Okay, do you want to send that to Betsy?
yeah, I'll mention it or separately. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Carolyn, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. That's it. We finished 20 minutes early. Have a great night.